Here we are. We're talking back to philosophy class, and we're having a little sub class here. We're interrupting with something relevant to today's world, which is from utopia to dystopia. The full paper of this will be available shortly, I hope. Unfortunately, my supervisor's had a bit of a personal issue with his family, and everything's delayed, but I'm just waiting on his sign off, and then I'll not just have it on Slack, but have it formally out there. So this is a particularly relevant topic, I think, in today's world, especially when we're moving from the concept of what we saw in sort of Orwellian sort of sense with the whole world of North Korea right now, Stalin's Russia, etc., into something more advanced. And it's sort of serendipitous that I happen to live in London these days, because many of these novels have been, for some reason, formed in London. 1984 was set in London. Brave New World, London. I don't know. London seems to be this place for dystopias. I mean, they should have done it at Silicon Valley, in my opinion, but anyway. So we're going to cover off on a number of topics. We're going to look at the hive and the collective, utopia to dystopia, how we re-educate people into forgetting and stopping learning, learning what you're told is right, groupthink, and sublimation, controlled and stifled innovation. I have a very different take, if you've already read my dissertation on both Huxley and Orwell. I don't believe quite the way that people say in fear. I've actually got an alternative argument that there is a twisted form of love in Big Brother. It's very paternalistic. If you think about it, it's sort of the bad relationship. I mean, it's the type of relationship where someone negs and is controlling, etc. It's not perfect love, but it's a twisted love. It's that love where you want to make sure that people are better despite themselves. And let's get started. So there are significant differences between these two novels, but the outcomes are the same. And the way that I would put it is 1984 is a preliminary sort of stage leading into the world of Brave New World, and potentially one where we devolve into if we really don't think about where the world is going right now. If we don't sort of think about rational thought, if we allow truth to escape us, if we basically don't allow the narrative to be captured and promoted and debated, if we allow the Twitter world of shouting people down because they're not right, then this is a world where we end in a sort of whimper rather than a bang. It's there's different types of state here, but all of them end the same. Now, the distinction I see between Orwell and Huxley is 500 years in the future. Orwell is a few decades in the past from where we are now. And think really the whole process of subliminating understanding in the mind and taking people and reprogramming them. None of this will ever be instant. Culture isn't instant. The problem with Afghanistan, for instance, and why it's falling apart right now is the Americans in their democratic fervor didn't realize that if you take over and want to change a country, you have to spend hundreds of years. Think of the British and India. India is very, very British now, even though the British aren't there and they've kicked them out. But the English spent 300 years teaching the Indians how to have their institutions and how to be very British, how to be democratic, how to think in that way. So we can complain all we want about colonialization, but really what they did was change the mindset in India. And any socialist or or fascist government really ends up with very small distinctions. So the analogy I'll give is in Anna Karenina, Tolstoy said that all happy families are the same, but all dysfunctional families are different and unique in their own way. And I would say that all good governments are the same. They have freedom, they have responsibility, and all dysfunctional governments are unique in their own way. And the problem is right now, I don't think we've got many non-dysfunctional governments, but anyway. So part of this problem is people are the core of government. And if we don't teach people how to understand and sort of interact, then people aren't going to be the changing process. It isn't going to be Bitcoin like some people think. Politics is always humans. So Posner, who is a legal scholar, ironically, also writes on or wrote sort of on a number of other concepts to do with literature and also scientific logic and a few other things like that. So the economic restructuring of society is always a key part of any dystopia. Everyone will call it a utopia. Utopia, Thomas More's idea of no place, which was really a re-envisioning of right back to Plato, is someone's perfect world. For Thomas More, it was a horrible place where everyone is equal. Everyone has the same concrete bunker that is their home. And to make sure that no one does something like wallpaper and make it unique, everyone moves every year. So you randomly get reassigned to another house, because then you have no incentive to be different. Yay.
Sounds heavenly.
I know. I mean, imagine wonderful little Thomas there thinking how to make people equal. And actually, that's the concept of utopia. People don't even get it. I mean, to actually tell you the truth, I think utopia is a dystopia. And in any utopia, the first thing you'll notice is freedom is always repressed. Why? Because you don't want these naysayers, these dissenters, these devil's advocates, these people like Craig Wright who cause problems and do things the wrong way, that isn't planned innovation, who do the things that we don't want. So we have a perception of the future being altered as well. We teach people slowly, we indoctrinate them into a new way of living. Right now, we have a system doing that. It's called Twitter. So if you look at Twitter, we seem to have this groupthink there. And it really is the suppression of free will, of rational thought, of the individual. And going back to Twitter and our modern young society right now, part of what they're being taught seems to be, oh, don't be different. Don't go outside the group. Don't think different. Don't say something that isn't agreed with all your friends, that isn't held as a concept by all your friends. Think about this for a moment. It's not a good place.
And you better have all the quirks of the group as well.
Oh, until the group changes. But then who sets the rules? It's like if we go back to Stalin and Russia. Stalin said Russia was a democracy. You have a complete right to vote however you want. You have a perfect free choice. You have the choice of voting for Stalin back then or going to the gulag. You have that choice. Stalin, gulag. I mean, it's not like he didn't give you choice. Think about it for a moment. That is a choice. I mean, in North Korea, you have a current sort of complete utter freedom. You can vote for the great leader or you can get shot. You have the right to stand up there and be shot at will. They will happily do it for you. So So,
And what is the right choice in that situation?
Neither of the other two choices. Just because the government says these are your two choices doesn't mean that that's what you have to do. Nor would I say something as stupid as old Winston in 1984 either. He was a bit daft. I mean, the only way to put it is he was daft. Given what he knew, going out there and hiring a building, yeah, really, you think you're not going to get caught? Yeah, slap the guy. All right. So what he should have done is sort of thought about things in a different way, kept things private, maintained everything, how he's going to release information, but not done it sort of by being silly and all the rest. But then by the time Winston was already there, society had already crushed people. So this is another point. The human body is owned by the state or has controls that stop you expressing yourself physically. Now, while I don't want to have piercings and tattoos, I also don't think the state has the right to tell me that I can't. Equally, it goes into a whole lot of other controls that end up being put in. But there's a limit. I mean, there's not a 0-1 binary here, and there is a continuum. Controlling growth and innovation, this is a major thing that we're starting to get, and this is part of why Europe is a lot slower than other countries, and even why America is slowing down. If we think about it for a moment, the regulations that we say to keep things flowing evenly often end up stagnating things. So there needs to be controls. We need to have limitations on things like fraud. We don't want to have people outside of the rules of the game, but we don't want to keep changing the rules. That's the distinction people don't get. So it's fine to have controls over banking. For instance, a savings and loan should be a savings and loan. You shouldn't be out there gambling on the stock market. That's fine, but then don't change that. Set the rule, say this is, if you want to be a saving and loan, these are the controls you have and these are the benefits you get. And 10 years later, don't go, we've changed the rules again, etc. And it makes what becomes an equilibrium. Now, in many societies, the idea of things are changing too quickly, how horrible, which was really the problem Marx had, was because growth happens, change happens. I mean, contrary to what people think, this concept that here in the West in the 21st century, everything's changing at a rate that's so rapid that we can't keep up. Well, let's go back and think about the 19th century. Imagine that you're in a small village and a railway comes through, the telegraph comes through. 1 year, it took you 3 months to be able to travel to the next village. Suddenly, you can go back and forwards to a city, you get messages from overseas. So the world has been changing drastically for a long time, more than people think. We love to say, oh, the Middle Ages, they were so stagnant. As a history scholar of the Middle Ages, I'll tell you that's bunk. The Middle Ages changed rapidly all the time. Imagine a plague wiping out 1/3 of the population, and then all the jobs changing, all the people moving, and then, well, the Vikings invade and everything changes again. And then, we've now become Protestant. What's this Catholic thing here? And ... So one thing that's constant through human history is change. And that's part of why many people through history have thought, well, let's just stop things. And sounds great. We can tell the people, those guys sitting in those lovely chairs there, wouldn't it be wonderful if we just made everything stagnant? But there's a problem. Stagnation, no good. So Marx was very much like this. Marx wanted to go backwards. Gandhi was the same. The concept that we all live in a little hut, we have our wives there spinning and creating cloth for us, and I, as the man, go out there and be big, powerful male who captures the antelope and takes it home, is complete BS. I'm sorry, I don't want to live in a hut. I don't want my wife having to spend 18 hours a day spinning cloth, and I don't want a dirt floor. I'm very happy having nice concrete floors with underfloor heating because I'm a lazy Westerner and I'm happy to be one. So there you go. So there are other early books here. Iron Heel is actually quite good. This one goes back about 100 years now. It predates all of these. We is one of the earliest ones. I'm not going to pronounce the second name of the guy, Ivan. He's a Russian. The translation sort of matters because some are better than others. Anthem by Ayn Rand actually goes back into the world of devolution, of stagnating and then going backwards. When the Sleeper Wakes, nice little American entry there. So technology isn't always good. So this is something we've got to remember. Technology is a tool, and how we use a tool matters. A hammer can build a house, a hammer can beat someone on the head. How we implement and develop matters. So I'd also recommend, if you have time, read Shakespeare's The Tempest. So the isolation and innocence that was reflected in that novel is also part of our characters in Brave New World. So remember our John the Savage guy. What does he say about this new society when he first takes note of it?
Not overly fond of it. He wants freedom. And
before that, he actually quotes Shakespeare. Oh, brave new world that has such people in it. Mirroring Miranda. Have you read Your Tempest? Do you know why he said that?
No, I haven't read that quite yet. I've got about the first 3 pages in.
Very interesting, but there's an innocence in Miranda. So Miranda hasn't had her innocence beaten out of her yet.
Mm.
And at this stage where John first goes from the savage village and sees this wonderful, shiny new place.
He initially finds it quite beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the innocence. That's the correlation between Shakespeare and Huxley that he's bringing out. So we need to remember that human frailties, weaknesses, our problems are part of what makes humanity beautiful. Our quirks, our foibles, our differences. So we shouldn't be thinking in this completely homogenized globalist view of everyone being equal and everything being the same. Stuff that. I like different nations. I like having my own area. I like visiting places. I like people visiting me. I like having a world that is all mixed up and not homogenized, that is heterogeneous, that is all over the place. I think it's really good that I can go to Africa and be totally lost and not understand anything. And I think it's really great that I can go to China and have something different again. I don't want to see this world of all the same. And liberal rational thought doesn't require us to. This is a misunderstanding. If we think about Japan, people say Japan is Western. Japan's not Western. Japan has embraced the good parts of Western culture and integrated them into their own. So Japan isn't Western at all. What Japan has done is realized that scientific logical thought and processes work. They have realized that mathematics and computers work. But if you go to Japan, and I've done it many, many times, You will also go out to the countryside, or you go to restaurants and you'll spend time with people, and you'll realize just how utterly different the people are at the same time. They are nothing like us, like at the moment where I am, the British. They are nothing like the French. But they've westernized, but not westernized. They have taken ideas. And this is an important concept. So in this world of cultural appropriation, which is complete BS if you think about it, because the Indian jackets that people say that we're appropriating, like when I wear one, actually came from 17th century English jackets. The katsu curry in Japan is actually Indian. I mean, if you go through, this whole world is homogenized. Concepts move, and that's a good thing. This idea that we all have to not take someone else's things, that's going back to the dystopia that wants to control us, the re-envisioning of words. So can we remember what Symes was doing in 1984? Anyone want to comment on what he would do by 2050?
He would create a language which would make it impossible to express dissenting ideas from what was prescribed by the state.
Yes. Now, it's not really the state anymore. Now it's Twitter. So what we have is re-education. We're teaching people something new. We're changing and altering history. We are limiting these things. We are limiting words. So imagine how little people are being taught right now. I still study, and I've just completed my master's degree in education. And very simply, it's abysmally bad. State schools, private schools in England are called public schools, but I won't go into that. So are very different than the paid schools. So I'll call them paid schools versus state schools. And one of the things I noticed in doing my little thematic analysis of head teachers is when you're talking to people in the old paid schools, they understand that they are breeding people to do their best. I'm not really breeding, but upbringing and rising and increasing and training and growing. Whereas the others are teaching equality. What do you think is better? If you're teaching someone in poverty, do you want to teach them to be equal to everyone in their school? Or do you want to teach them to fight, to be different, to have their own ideas, to express themselves, to grow, that they, no matter how poor, can achieve? I came from nothing, I did. Think about it, why not? If I can come from single mother, poor ass, white trash, not that my mother brought me up as white trash, but I was surrounded by all of that part of society, family, then why can't others? But we need to be educated out of it. So we get into a world in the future where we talk about eugenics again. We talk about concepts that are starting to become more and more viable right now. In Brave New World, they talk about Boskonowski's process, which is biological duplicates, identical. They talk about the idea of genetically engineering children. And not many people seem to realize, but even in 1984, there have already been a development or two around class. There's the higher party, there's the middle party, there's the proles. The proles are in different classes as well, and they do their own jobs and they have their own roles. and you're selected early. But it moves and it becomes something where you're born into. So Helmholtz, why do you think he was a tragic sort of protagonist and hero in this story?
He was
He was
smart enough that
wrong.
he could understand that he could be free in his ideas, but he didn't quite know what to do with that, because wherever he went with that, he found the sort of barrier closed in on him and forced him back into his very narrow career, which was creating these feelies and essentially trying to get people excited about nothing, which he found quite
But even
boring.
more, he wanted art and literature.
Mm.
But when John tries to bring it to him, he's disgusted. He rejects it. So think what society's done to get you to that stage where even when you crave something, you'll throw it back at someone who tries to give it to you. So when we see the rejection of society between John and others, then what we're really talking about is looking at what we have and imagine someone coming from, say, 1890 right now, someone who may be a Carnegie level of individual who's built something, who has entering the Gilded Age, someone who understands art, literature, aristocratic values. What do you think they'd see and do now in our Twitter world of groupthink?
They'd have to reject it wholeheartedly, I would imagine. They'd see it as collectivist nonsense. They would, well, these people are conscious of their own individuality, whereas I think Helmholtz was also conscious of his individuality. He started to be, but maybe because he saw this Shakespeare, he saw how much greater it could have been, and therefore he went back into his shell almost.
So everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state.
Right.
A world without civil liberties. The state isn't the problem. And I'm going to say that again, the state isn't the problem. How we define the state is. If we allow the state to be something that doesn't embrace the individual rather than trying to be the whole, that's our problem. The state isn't the problem. It's us. If we don't fight to ensure that we have our rights as individuals, the state isn't going to give them to us. We won't get them by rejecting the state. We need to make sure that the state works for us. It needs to not control us. We need to control it.
I think we saw a good example during the COVID time, because I always thought the state was supposed to represent the collective, but I hardly learned that it's actually the opposite. It should represent the ultimate individual with all their constitutional rights and their civil liberties as an individual and not as a collective.
Completely agree. So that is a good introduction to Fromm and Anderson. I don't know if you've read any of Fromm, but modern society undermines an individual's inner peace and security, as it says there, and it stops us reasoning. We're uncertain. We have distractions. So Twitter, for instance, is a good way of doing it. And I set up rules for my Twitter use now. And I do that to make sure that I don't get sucked into the abusive, addictive drug that these things are. So how I act, what I can do, blocking people, etc., it becomes part of it. Now, one of the problems that we see in all of this is the concept of thought police. That's, as old Orwell said, coercive persuasion and the results of integrating different concepts within people, whether they're true or not. It is the concept of making us engage because we want to be liked, we want to be part of everything else, we want friends. And over time, rather than the state doing that, what we're seeing as an alternative that is actually probably more frightening is the developing alternative, which is a global, all-consuming alternative, which is a technocracy. Now, that's the really scary thing here. The worst thing that we can have is a technocracy where on technology, we're led to believe, not that it's true, but we are led to believe because this is what we're told people want. How many people on this call believe that a Twitter poll gives them an accurate representation of society? Anyone?
Hopefully not.
No, but why do people do them? I mean, if Elon Musk, who has lots of followers, does one, that must be right. Hey, no? So I agree. Unfortunately, these utopian fantasies, they're really written as a warning. They're there to scare us into what could be. They're seductive, they're enticing. To many people out there, they will see, I could be in power. They understand that this is a world that I could rule in, except even the rulers end up as slaves. So it's pleasure over happiness. If you remember quite some time back with my travel, we talked about Plato and the idea of happiness. And Brendan, do you remember some of that?
Yes.
And what did Plato think about happiness? Aristotle was similar too.
Well, I mean, for Plato, it was really about being part of this collective. You know, he was promoting the idea that there shouldn't be a family unit, that everyone should be living together in this kind of collective society, and that within that there'd be classes of people who would have jobs, and that happiness would really be them doing those particular roles within society, and just that. So it's kind
yes,
of
obviously you look like a cleaner to me. I think you should be a cleaner and you would be massively happy. I'm going to keep telling you how happy you'll be being a cleaner.
Yes.
You think you should be a cleaner?
Oh, I would love the idea of being a cleaner.
Exactly. You're on board. See?
Is it happiness just momentarily, though? It's just a moment. It's
No,
not.
pleasure is. See, this is where we go back to Aristotle, where his argument was no man can be called happy until he's dead, because it's the amalgamation of your life. Because he gave the example of a nice little Greek king who was set to be killed, and then or Persian king, Greek king with Persia, and basically said, "Oh, woe is me! I used to be a king." Blah blah blah, and the Persian king spared him. Trying to cut a story short here, because he realized, oh, this is a great example, and etc. etc. The whole point being, though, you can be at the top of the world and a king, and the next moment you're a slave and about to be executed. And you don't know what the future brings. I mean, you could be at the top of running a crypto exchange one day, seemingly a billionaire, then next you find yourself in a prison sentence for 20 years. So yeah, anyway, as it says there in Semler's bit, basically, yeah, we get people into servitude, but the flogging and the kicking doesn't mean physical all the time. Sometimes it's just mental. Learning what is right. This is not thinking for ourselves. It started because of Americans with Nixon, and then got fulfilled with Reagan, with the whole idea of removing the bipartisan reporting. They thought it would make media fairer, and then started removing some of the controls around other areas of reporting, etc., etc. And now we have a partisan system of media where most people only ever see one side of the issue, because that would be better. It's free speech. No, free speech, basically what we should do is go back to the original area pre-Nixon and have everyone report both sides of the argument, so that everyone has to actually read things. Like if I want to read the Times, I get both sides of the argument. Washington Post, both sides of the argument. Wall Street Journal, both sides of the argument. Right now, I'm weird. I subscribe to 20, God knows how many newspapers, Telegraph, Times, and even, I'm embarrassed to say it, The Sun. I actually subscribe to The Sun, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, a few other ones owned by Mr. Bezos there, some stupid Californian thing, BBC, Bloomberg. Oh God, too many. And I try and actually keep up with the damn things too. More than the damn headlines, by the way. Although I must admit, I do ignore anything to do with boring individual type, normal life in Britain, America, etc. So, Ministry of Love. People actually say that that's ironic. I actually have a very different take, which is in my thesis, which is that it is about love. The state loves you. The state wants you. The state obsesses over you. The state will do anything for you. I take it you've probably read my thesis, Brendan, because like me, you read too much.
Yes, yes, I have.
And what do you think of my argument on that one?
I mean, it's kind of, it makes a lot of sense. You know, it was, when I first read the book, I thought, oh, this is a bit of a joke, because really the state is just there to use you and chew you up and spit you out. But then when you think about that a little bit further, you can see that, but that's why the state loves you, is because you are that tool to it, and without you, it can't function. And
but
so
that's what paternalism is. What is the root of paternalism?
Father.
Father.
Love.
And if we're a horrible, horrible father who beats his children to make sure that they're good, circa, say, 19th century, I mean, aren't we
Doing it because you love them?
We love them because we only beat them because we love them.
Basically, the
It's
state is like a
twisted
abusive
kind of love.
boyfriend.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, this is the problem. It's a very dark mirror, sort of reflective, twisted concept. But there is pure love and there is a twisted love that we have throughout this world. And lots of couples are in this twisted love relationship that I would say is the state. And if we think for a moment, then John here, our savage, is embracing an enlightenment world, a principle based on Shakespeare, Milton. It's very different to the world that has developed. And it's very different to the world that we're seeing developing, the one that is rejecting the West, that are saying how bad Western concepts are. Now, don't get me wrong. The Belgians did lots of terrible things in the Congo. I mean, that's why Austin Powers made fun of the Belgians and called them evil. the British did lots of stupid, bad things, and justified them by going, our bad things aren't as bad as the things that the guys who were here were doing. An example, Black Hole of Calcutta and following that, the people don't often believe it now, but the Calcutta Maharaja that the English replaced did things like cutting open a pregnant woman because he wanted to see what it was like inside her, because he was the ruler. He skinned people alive because he thought it was fun, not because he was punishing them, because he could. All sorts of inverted commas, fun things for a psychopath who has no controls. And people talk about how the British did X, Y, Z, and they forget that, well, which is worse? And the argument becomes, yes, the British did this, but what was the alternative? And we need to weigh these decisions and think about them. Now, if we're going to go into what is right, then what we're told is right needs to be something that we think about with our own views, our own values, our own conscience. And I can't tell you what's right. I can tell you what I believe is right in my heart, but I can't tell you what is right in yours. And if we disagree, that doesn't mean necessarily that I'm right or you're wrong. But for instance, if you're from a Northern African province worshipping Baal, and you believe that around the time of the Roman Republic, and you believe that throwing babies into the fire is something your God wanted, then I'm going to tell you you're wrong. I mean, it's just one of those things. And you can argue that that's your right, and I'll argue it's not. So there are always indivisibility problems. So suppression, sublimation. Now, the suppression of will comes down to how we squash ideas, how we tell people not to talk, how we try and make others not listen. Now, I want you to think about our current world. Think for a moment, when we're having Twitter trolls, having others, having Facebook sort of wars. Is that like the real world? If I come up to you and have a conversation, is that the same as if I do it on Twitter? Do people act the same in the virtual world? I mean, it's one thing even, people act outside of normal sort of restraints when they are, well, in their own identity themselves. They get carried away. They don't put the normal social brakes on when someone's actually there. They allow themselves to get carried away. I have in the past. But when you're pseudonymous, worse. When you're anonymous, we go back to the ring of Gyges. So all of it keeps trying to form this ideal world of Plato. But everyone has this one super big flaw that they don't seem to realize. So, Brendan, what do you think the flaw would be that everyone thinks about when they want to bring in and break the world and make the world of Plato?
Well, they think that they know how to do it, and that they should be the ones in charge. And
exactly,
it's always about asserting control. And it comes back to what you were saying about utopia before. Really, there's
everyone
no vision
thinks
of
they will be the leader. This is the problem. They think it will be their utopia, my
the fatal
ideal
conceit.
world. Yes, very good. And that's what everyone keeps thinking. They don't think, how do I integrate with others? How do I force people to be like me? I mean, back in the early days of Bitcoin, there was a series of emails between Satoshi and another that never got released and probably won't by one of the early 2009 people, where I had a debate, and the debate was going on about capitalism and like the ideal of socialism, etc. And I said, but what if I don't agree? And they said, well, you'll have to. The group will always have this way. And I said, but what if I still don't agree? And the answer came down to, but we'll force you. And my comment was, but you just said you're not going to have force in your world. Yes, but you don't agree. And I mean, this is the problem. They keep going, we won't have force, but we'll force you. How do you have a forceless force? I mean, really? So we need to repress freedom to make any world that is actually sort of squashed into this model that fits someone's idea.
Sorry, Craig, do you not think that Twitter's kind of got there anyway? Because if you say the wrong thing, you can end up with the police coming knocking on your door.
I get people doxing me all the time.
Well, I was just thinking more along the lines of hurting people's feelings. I mean, it's got that bad at the moment where the police are being sent around because they've hurt somebody's feelings on Twitter.
Yeah, that's a bit ridiculous, but it depends on how you do it. If you do it by actually basically going into racial slurs and things like this, that's one thing. But if you do it just by going, staying within bounds, that's another. It doesn't mean that people won't lie or send fake things. People will try and do this. So we are in a world that, well, we can think about what we're trying to achieve. So Brave New World, they sought pleasure and physical gratification. Isn't that what many people think that is happiness and human flourishing right now? I mean, really? So censorship and control. Censorship doesn't mean not being able to say anything you want. It means stopping the truth. That's a different thing. So the being talked down on Twitter, you don't need to listen to someone on Twitter if you don't want, but equally you don't need to respond and go, you're an idiot. I mean, ironically, people say that I block them and I do things that I'm censoring them. But I don't stop them doing anything. I don't go out to their conversations and engage and go, no, that's wrong. Basically, unless someone points me to a conversation and sort of forwards it to me, I don't get involved. I don't even notice. I don't look for anyone else's things. But they come to me, and if they're going to not debate properly, as in not be disingenuous, not like the guy today who tried to tell me what I was saying about Bitcoin when I wrote an article about SegWit. Yeah, like I don't know what I wrote about my own thing. Yeah, then that's reality. So we need to think about the economics of our system. Growth is good. I'm sorry, but the watermelons out there, you know, red on the inside, green on the outside, they want the world to stop. But this is a typical communist thing. It's about control. Because growth, well, it's unpredictable. You don't know who will be in charge in 10, 20, 30 years. So if you can stagnate the world, we can go back to a nice feudal system where my family can be in charge for the next 300 years. Sounds great, doesn't it? Yay, not. I'm sure someone's going to take that quote when I just said that out of context, because they're going to say, Craig Wright said stagnation is great. And then you'll point out the next bit and we'll, yeah, anyway. So economic activity is always aligned to the individual in the state. So there we have Big Brother. Sort of looks like he should be a Twitter CEO, but anyway. as I argued, Ministry of Love is really well named. It's something that seduces members. They stop trusting themselves. They stop believing themselves. They stop finding anything in anyone else. And over time, they lose knowledge. They lose information. They stop thinking.
It
Brave
really
New World.
shows its efficacy in the last line of the book when Winston's walking down the hallway and he realizes that finally he's realized now how much he loves Big Brother.
Exactly. And he really does. That's the point at the end.
After being tortured for 6 months or whatever.
He's like an abused woman. Yes, my husband beats me, but he loves me. So that's one idea of the state. We have passion surrogates. We have soma holidays. We have all these things that take away the world. Some people want to bring that in. We have this nice little image of a whole lot of Windows machines. And we have our brave new world there. The feelies, the pleasure seeking. No cost, all pleasure. And if we think about it, most people don't seem to understand that Ready Player One was a dystopian novel. I mean, people look at it and they go, wow, isn't that great? And I talk to people at conferences now, and they talk about, wouldn't it be great if we had a Ready Player One world?
Not really.
I agree. You mean the world where the demon is confusing you into thinking that you're living in the real world when you're not? I mean,
when everything in the real world is falling over and you're being hypnotized by this virtual state that you live in.
Oh God, I'm not a fan of Woody Allen, but even he had a movie about this where people lived in pods and were confused and out of reality. So if Woody Allen can get it, God, the state of the world where people aren't. I mean, so bureaucratic theory is integrated into management theory in all of this, and Taylorism is as well. And this is part of our problem. We're forgetting right now. I had some of these arguments today with people in the organization, and part of what, I won't go into the details of what was discussed, but they were saying about some of our clients, some of our people out there, some people wanting to use Bitcoin, say X, they want this, they want, and my thing was, part of being a leader is saying no. Our job is to deliver fast, cheap, secure protocol. And going, oh, but we can do X, Y, Z. Not our job. See, the problem is people have got to learn the limits of what there is. So the Matrix series, I know people in the 90s said, oh, well, this is so amazingly new. But if you study philosophy, you'll actually find that there are many examples of the Matrix. Sort of, if you could live it in a virtual world where you get everything you want, would you? And as homework, I'm going to actually give you something. There's a Red Dwarf episode. And in Red Dwarf, they do this. They have a virtual world where everything's perfect, apart from Rimmer. Rimmer screws everything up from everyone because Rimmer wants negative things, which is the old, what is it? There's an old story about there's a man on like finds while he's fishing like an urn, and he takes it up and there's a genie and he says, you can have any wish you want, but the only catch is that the person you hate the most will also get what you wish for, but double.
So poke one of my eyes out.
Yeah.
That was in Brave New World.
Yeah. So yes, poke my eye out. Yeah. So my neighbor can be blind. So
What's the name of the episode though, Craig?
That's what you got to find out.
Oh,
And
okay.
even watch
Watch
it.
the whole
Even
series.
better.
Yeah.
It's,
Love Red Dwarf.
I feel like I've seen it. Is it the one where they're actually going into like a video, like virtual worlds, and they've got like there's a Western
Not
one?
the one with the despair squid,
Oh,
but
okay.
they are in a virtual world. Yes.
It's season 3, I
Oh,
believe,
goodness.
or season 4, but pretty sure season 3. But yeah,
Yeah.
you'll have to look for the
I'm
specific.
sure I've watched
I'm
it
going to
before.
have to make you rewatch classic British comedy
Watch Red Dwarf. then.
about a man who wanted to have a farm on Fiji and get himself a sheep and a cow and breed horses. All right. So,
Right.
as I said, we're in London. We're past the world of 1984, but we're heading towards Brave New World. And as we start entering this world, and as we start thinking of the virtual and outside relationships, we stop loving and trusting people, because if we don't take individuality into all of this, if we don't think about the real cost that is associated with these things, the anti to pleasure, the duty, the sort of devotion, then when we start thinking that pleasure is actually the thing that we need to go for, we stop really understanding the true values within human nature. So these are not stagnant worlds in this novel. Each of them are developing, but they're developing along the lines of what the state wants. The problem with that is it's not the lines of what any human outside individually would want. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you've read both of those novels. Also recommend some of the other ones I mentioned. It's a bit harder as reading. The authors, especially the Russian translation, a bit harsher. But Mark Twain's version, he's the American who wrote that, and some of the others are actually good. Iron Heel's very good. The author of that one is famous for a certain book about a dog, Call of the Wild, Mr. Jack London. So Mr. Jack London didn't only write about dogs, he also wrote dystopian fiction. It's funny how people remember the dog and do movies about this dog that goes out into the wilderness. And I think the dystopian fiction was actually far more important, but hey, what would I know? I mean, I only think that values that we read and learn and come to understand society and our place in it and how we can make sure that we have a functioning government are important, not that, well, there's a happy dog who found his life in the wilderness.
But how will the dog find food, Craig, without an owner to pry the tin open?
Well, he learned to eat squirrels.
Craig, could I ask a question quickly?
You just did.
Okay, another one. Where are we on the scale between Brave New World and 1984, do you think, today in society?
Oh, the West is heading sort of monorail and the wrong part of the world speed way too fast towards Brave New World. We've stopped thinking. We're sort of all, yeah. But we can only do that by educating ourselves, thinking for ourselves, and not thinking that if we read one particular media that everyone does, that everything's great.
I would say it's ironic that we've got the internet and it's the source of basically all the information you could ever want, and yet people hang out in such small parts of it.
I agree.
I think today's internet is not what you just said. It's actually the opposite. And that's the worst thing, is we don't realize how much it's being censored right now. If you do I'm not going to mention the search engine, but if you do a search and you look for alternative or opposite facts regarding, okay, it's a hot topic from the tool last year regarding vaccination, for example, you will find nothing against it in the first 10 pages, whatever the query input, and those things exist.
I mean, it depends, on what you've been searching. That's the problem. I mean, it's not so much that. Google actually creates something for you. So all your cookies, all your other things, they give you what they think is best for you. Very paternalistic, but different people end up with different things. So some people will get pro-Trump. Some people will get Trump as evil. Some people will get Macron. Some people will get pro-Putin. Some people will get pro-Ukraine. Despite what they say about all of these things, they will serve up whatever crap makes you click more.
The thing with the search engines, though, is that doesn't Google like own 99.5% of the library that every single search engine uses? So you're gonna, the only results
probably only
get are actually from
97%.
Google, yeah.
And
So
they copy results as well. Like after the first few pages, it's all repeats.
No, ads.
Yeah,
No, not ads, not ads.
No, the repeats of the
literally
same
keep-
articles over and
keep
over again
going.
on the same different pages. So you can go 12 pages in, but you're still getting the same search, the same actual
Page repeated
on
over
each
and over.
page. Yeah.
I've got a question for Craig, and bringing it back to philosophy a bit again. Does philosophy come before the state, or does the state form and then philosophies develop afterwards? And why I'm asking is because, like you're saying about how states can become bad and become stagnant, do people then after that fact develop the philosophies to fix things, or beforehand? And the importance of learning.
So the way I would say it is, each of us exists within society, and that colors us. But each of us also happens to be able to think. So individuals create and believe and develop philosophies. It's not, Socrates developed something, Plato developed something else, Aristotle developed something else, and you can say that they're influenced. But Aristotle and Plato are very different. They may have had Socrates as their mentor, but the two are in many ways polar opposites of each other. And there's not only two poles, that's what people don't understand. If we think of the world, we got north, south, east, west, blah, blah, blah. These guys even more. So this is the point. We have to consider that we're in a multipolar world with lots of different options. And there isn't one start, there isn't one finish. It's much more than that.
Lots of social engineering going on there right now.
Yes, people want a hell of a lot of their opinion without actually arguing their opinion and convincing people. They want to force people into it. This is what we see on social media right now. I had someone yesterday on Twitter from the BTC side thank me for not just blocking him because I was discussing things, and he thought it was really weird. But if you're not rude to me, I'm quite happy to have a conversation. And he doesn't need to agree with me. I don't want him to agree with me. I don't expect him to agree with me. He can have different opinions. So, it's good to see that we have season 2, Better Than Life. And I've noticed that in the chat already. So you've just ruined my homework. Very good episode. Anyway, it teaches lots of problems. Just because of that, you're all going to have to watch it and then see that it's fair squid.
Sounds good.
Currently,
Right.
I'm reminded of Brazil and also Blade Runner, the original one, because I think that's kind of edging to where I'm seeing we're at the moment. But yeah, thank you, Craig. For your time.
Just before Craig goes, I'm just going to say to all the people in here who are not in the Slack, if you can let Brendan know that you'd like access to the Slack, and we will sort your access out, and we'll get you in the philosophy room so you can follow along. And also, we're going to have a little chat and set some work for the upcoming month, so that you all have stuff to feed back to Craig. I want to see people feeding back this knowledge to Craig next month.
Good.
Great.
All right. I'll try and get everything for our next thing, and we'll get back onto the normal everything we're doing.
So the next should be, is it Plutarch's Lives?
Yes. I mean, it's very long, so hopefully you've had even more time to actually get through it.
I actually got through the whole thing, and that was a slog, but very worthwhile. And I strongly urge everyone, so just going back, read Artaxerxes. So he's like I think about the third last life, and he's a Persian, and just some of the things that happen in his story are a really fantastic juxtaposition over how the West, which is the kind of the Greek Roman side of things, dealt with people and things, and how the East really did things in a very different way.
Iran, Persia was very different in most of history.
Yeah.
All righty. At that, I'm going to call it an evening, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
Hope you enjoyed, and
Thanks.
read those books. I definitely recommend. Some of them are a bit harder because, I mean, like Iron Heel, it's written 120 years ago, thereabouts. So some of the language is a little bit different than you'd expect now, because even over 120 years, English changes. But recommended.
Recommend A Tempest.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you, Craig.
Hey.
Night.
Night.